When you start to look at the analysis, another part of this is coming up with the alternatives that you might think about. What are the alternatives in terms of what are the possibilities? What are the possibilities of your solutions? What's required here is realistic implementable MECE alternatives, decision criteria that are tied to the situation and the organized values and missions, and then have those alternatives evaluated against criteria so that what the audience sees is a clear path and they're gaining the knowledge of why the solution that you have chosen is the best solution. What you want to try to avoid are to making decisions that require further investigation. Having imperfect information is normal. And the expectation is you're going to make a clear decision. You don't want to use a sandwich method of providing undesirable alternatives to make the chosen alternative look better. All the alternatives can be really good, but one is better than the other because of this point. Ignore the fact that the chosen alternative needs to be implemented at some point. If serious obstacles exist, it's going to look bad. So you make sure that what you're telling them can actually be done. And then don't forget to use the decision criteria to select the most appropriate alternative as you're going through. What do we mean by MECE? Mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. It means the ideas, the topics, issues, solutions, they're organized into buckets of like items. And the me part of that, the mutually exclusive, any idea can only be placed in one bucket and only one bucket. And the CE part of that, collectively exhaustive, is buckets can cover the entire universe of possible items. There is a later video in the tools section that talk about MECE in much further details, just as there is in terms of the power of the pyramid. With the pyramid, your analysis is really about what's the situation, what's the complication, what question are you asking? And then as you start to develop your solutions, your alternatives, those are answers. Those answers will have key messages associated with them, and your analysis will provide the support for each of those key messages that are part of that answer. And it's key that as you do this, alternative you select has actually got the best support. In terms of your key decision criteria, there's a number of items in terms of they need to be consistent with the mission, strategy, culture, goals of the organization that you're talking to. They should improve and must maintain profitability. They're going to do things like potentially increase sales, market share, ROI. There's a number of other items that you can add there. They need to maintain things like customer satisfaction and brand, if not also increase them. And they need to be brief. What this means in terms of requirements, so they have to be within the present or future resources and capabilities. They have to be within the acceptable risk parameters. They have to have some ease and speed of implementation. They should improve things like employee morale, safety, and turnover. There has to be some flexibility retained in it. And then in today's world, they also have to minimize the environmental impact. So an example of this is if you're going out and purchasing some clothing. And the idea here in terms of the decision criteria is they finish off the brand or style that I choose to purchase must, right? What are the key things that may help you make that decision, make that a successful purchasing decision? Why do you choose the article you did? And the criteria you may come up with is fit or price or fashion or a combination of the items that you see on the slide. Decision criteria must be measurable, at least to a point of comparison. So alternative A is more profitable than alternative B. They must be related to the problem statement in the alternative. So if you're talking about something else, you're missing the point here. Missing alternatives or key to decision criteria might be what's happening, or you may have a poorly formed problem statement, or there might be other issues in terms of why you don't have that relation and you need to make sure that relationship occurs. You need to connect to the value, to the mission of the client organization, and then put that in a table where you go along and say, yes, the alternative we've chosen has met the decision criteria. I often get my teams to put the decision at the top because if this is the real world, you're getting paid to talk about the solution, not what you're not recommending them to do. So talk about that solution, hype it up, and then talk about why the other solutions don't do as well as the solution that you've talked about. And you can do this in a variety of different ways. And if you take a look at the slide, there's some ideas in terms of how that can be done. What is not recommended in a case competition is important because you're in a competition. You need to discredit the competitor's solutions if you can, right? They're going to come up with something. And if you can discredit it, it gives you that a bit of an advantage. So discuss the negative impacts of the non-chosen alternatives. You should not do this because type of idea as you're talking about those. And then finally, you need to make sure this is connected to the recommendation and the implementation. The selected alternative is the solution, the recommendation you're making. And you want to make sure as to why it was selected. It needs to be illogical and needs to be aligned. And if you choose the right ideas in terms of the decision criteria, that's easy to discover for the audience members. And then the selected alternative should not be things like to dismiss or fire the person that you're presenting to. If you're deciding to do that, you might want to change your audience and avoid things like rogue, whimsical types of alternatives, and especially the do nothing. You're not there to recommend the status quo. They've invited you in to solve the problem. They're looking for some sort of recommendation, some sort of way of getting beyond the problems that they're experiencing at the moment.